Good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining my channel. And the channel is called Celebrating Women Worldwide. And why do we want to do that? It's because women, I believe, are the integral part of this planet, of this universe. And this is a reading from Great Lives, Great Deeds. And this talks about, people that have really paved the way for us in the world. So I've just sorting through this. Book's really old. It's probably I'm thinking it's about 70 years old. And I come across a passage called The Fabulous Queen. And, the queen we're talking about is Cleopatra. Cleopatra of the Egyptian times. Cleopatra is usually thought of as an Egyptian siren who killed herself for love of the Roman general Mark Antony. Little of this is true. Although Cleopatra was queen of the ancient kingdom, not a drop of Egyptian blood flowed through her veins. She was a Macedonian Greek. Her Egyptian capital, Alexandria, was a Greek city, and her court language was actually Greek. Her destiny had been founded by the Ptolemy, Macedonian general of Alexander the Great, who, after Alexander's death, seized Egypt and made himself king. There is not a shred of evidence that connects Cleopatra with any of the men except Julius Caesar and 3 years after his death, Mark Antony. These were not ideal liaisons, but unions approved by her priests and recognised in Egypt as marriages. The idea that she employed all her wiles to seduce these men is absurd, yet the legend has persisted for 2,000 years, chiefly because poets and playwrights, including Shakespeare, emphasised her physical charms and passions rather than her brains and courage. Her deeds have revealed her as a brilliant, resourceful woman who spent her life in a struggle to keep her country from being swallowed by the Romans. Born in 68 or 69 BC, Cleopatra grew up amid palace intrigue and violence. Her father, Ptolemy VII, died when Cleopatra was 18, and she then became queen, ruling jointly with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy VII. 2 years later, the young Ptolemy, nominated by a trio of palace schemers, fought Cleopatra into exile in Syria, showing the spirit that was to characterize her life. She promptly raised an army and started to march back across the desert to fight for her throne. This was the Cleopatra whom Caesar met in the autumn of 48 BC. He had come to Egypt in pursuit of the Roman general Pompey, his adversary in a struggle for political power, the kind of... And there she is, Cleopatra. I'll just show you that picture of her. It was a struggle that was to keep Rome in turmoil for almost a century. What did Cleopatra look like? The only clues are a few coins stamped with her profile. And a bust dug from Roman ruins some 1800 years after her death. They show Inquili nose, a beautifully formed mouth with finely chiselled lips. A number of ancient historians wrote of her ravishing beauty, but they were not men by Petrarch. His grandfather was told about Cleopatra by a physician acquainted with one of the royal cooks. Plutarch wrote that her actual beauty was not in itself so remarkable that none could be compared to her. All early writers agreed, however, on her fascinating conversation, her lovely voice, her anointment and subdual in speech. She spoke 6 languages, was well acquainted with Greek history, literature and philosophy, was a shrewd negotiator, and apparently a first-rate military planner. She also had an ability to dramatize herself. When summoned by Caesar to come to the palace he had taken over in Alexandria, Cleopatra slipped into the city at dark, had herself tied up in a roll of carpet, and then concealed, was carried to Caesar's apartment, whether her clever scheme was to elude assistance in her brother's hire or to impress Caesar. It was one of the most dramatic entrances of all time. Her courage and her charm helped to convince Caesar that it would be wise to restore her to her throne. Possibly to impress Caesar with Egyptian wealth, Cleopatra the next spring organised a huge expedition up the Nile. For weeks she and Caesar floated along in an elaborate houseboat accompanied by 400 vessels carrying troops and supplies. Then in June, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Caesarea, Greek for the little Caesar. The infant, his father's only son, seems to have the root of an ambitious plan for Caesar and Cleopatra to merge Rome and Egypt into one vast empire to be ruled by them and their line. Promptly on the birth of the boy, Caesar left Alexandria and began military operations to Asia Minor and North Africa, mopping up all the remaining oppositions. Within a year, he returned to Rome, undisputed dictation. Cleopatra was there with Caesarion, living in a magnificent villa. As a queen with a royal court, Cleopatra began to exert her influence on Roman life. She bought coiners from Alexandria to improve the Roman mint, financiers to arrange Caesar's tax program. Her astronomers reformed the Roman calendar, creating the one on which our present system is based. Caesar had her statue placed in a new temple built to honour Venus, and he issued a coin and on which Venus and Eros could be recognised as Cleopatra with Caesarion in her arms. His power seemed absolute. Then suddenly, 20 months after Cleopatra came to Rome, Julius Caesar was a corpse, murdered on the Ides of March. Was Cleopatra grief-stricken? No one knows. After a month she sailed back to Egypt. Historians have no facts about the next 3 years of her reign. It's said that in the power struggle that now plagues Rome into the civil war. And that's her famous picture, Cleopatra. Was a contestant sought her aid. Apparently her policy was one of the cautious waiting to see who was going to become Caesar's successor. When Mark Antony emerged as the strongman of the East, he bade Cleopatra meet him at Tauris in Asia Minor. For the time she ignored his summons. Then she set sail with splendid fleet carrying gold claves, horses and jewels. At Tauris, instead of going ashore in a humble role, Cleopatra coolly waited at anchor. After she had deftly manoeuvred Antony into becoming her guest, she confronted him with a dazzling spectacle, the gallery silver-striped oars beating time in the music of the flutes and harps, its ropes worked by beautiful slaves dressed as simple nymphs and graces, incense burners pouring out exotic perfumes. Reclining under a gold awning was Cleopatra, garbed as Venus, fanned by young boys resembling cupids. When the banquet was over, Cleopatra presented Antony with the gold plates, elaborate drinking vessels, couched and embroideries that had used. The next night she entertained Antony and his officers again, and lavished similar gifts on each night. Her goal was not to gain Antony's affection, but to impress upon him the wealth of Egypt, hence its power as an ally. 3 months after Antony came to Alexandria, and spent the winter. He left in the spring, 6 months before Cleopatra bore their twins, and did not see her again for nearly 4 years. Cleopatra meanwhile strengthened her country defences, built up her navy, amassed gold and supplies. When Anthony, hoping to extend his power in the east, asked her to meet him in Syria, she came as a determined bargainer. She instructed an agreement whereas Egypt would be given all the vast areas the pharaohs had possessed. 400 years before, but which were now Roman provinces. Anthony also agreed to a legal marriage, and in celebration of the event, coins were struck bearing their two heads. At the time, Cleopatra began a new dating of her reign. Now 33, she set out with Antony to make war on the Persians, but as the Euphrates River, she had to give up the campaign. She was pregnant again. The child arrived in the autumn, and that winter there was a desperate appeal from Anthony. His army had been cut to pieces, and the haggard remnants had barely escaped to the Syrian coast. Cleopatra, with money, supplies, and weapons, sailed to his rescue. The next year, 35 BC, she had to use her vows to keep Anthony, his mind clouded with prolonged drinking, from attempting another invasion of Persia, realizing that their true enemy was Caesar's nephew, Octavian, and legal heir from the Rome dominant the West. She urged Antony to concentrate on his overthrow. In 32 BC, she participated war with Octavian by persuading Anthony to take 2 steps, issue a writ divorcing his other wife, Octavian's beautiful sister, and order troops to cross the Aegean Sea into Greece. Cleopatra was now at her peak, with vassal kings from the Middle East paying her account, the Athenians showering her with honour, hailing her as a Aphrodite, and erecting her statue in the Acropolis. Then at Antrim on the west coast of Greece, late in the afternoon of September 31 BC, everything crumbled. Historians have never agreed about this crucial battle, why Anthony, with a superior army, let it become a naval engagement, or why Cleopatra, with the sea fight raging and the outcome still undecided, hoisted sail and made off downwards for Egypt with her 60 warships, or why, and that's the excavation, that's Cleopatra's head on the right. Yeah, that's Cleopatra's, one of her statues, I think. Anthony left his huge army behind, boarded her ship, and sailed away with her. At home, when news of the disaster spread, Cleopatra firmly put down all discontentment. She tried to strengthen ties with neighbouring countries. She also began transferring warships from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, a stupendous project which involved dragging them across miles of desert. When Octavian's troops arrived and Egypt's frontiers fell to them, Cleopatra remained in Alexandria, prepared to bargain with Octavian or to fight him. But when the invading army closed in, the Queen's navy and cavalry deserted. Anthony killed himself, taken alive. Cleopatra was put under guard and warned that if she killed herself, her children would be put to death. Though Octavian promised to be merciful, Cleopatra assumed that her fate would be like the hundreds of other royal captives who had been paraded in chains through the streets of Rome, then executed. Spirited and enduring it to the end, she pretended to abandon all thoughts of suicide. Securing position to visit Anthony's grave, she apparently made contact with faithful followers as her litter was carried through her streets. She returned to her quarters, bathed, dined, and made her attendants dress her as Venus. Of what happened next we know only this. Roman officers breaking into her quarters found Cleopatra dead. According to the legend, the queen had allowed herself to be strung by an to be stung by a ASP smuggled to her in a basket of figs. When Barbarians' conquest of Egypt was celebrated in Rome, a statue of Cleopatra was dragged through the streets with a ASP clinging to one arm. Her three children by Anthony Caesarion had been executed, were forced to march in a degrading procession. It was then that the Roman poets, to court favour with the victor, began to spread the myth of a wicked and immoral Egyptian queen, the myth which continues to this day. Wow, I didn't know that. Amazing. Amazing woman.